permanent cover for secret agents. We are fortunate in having with us for this occasion Colonel Robinson, Chief of Schools and Training. Colonel, before we start the picture, perhaps you wouldn't mind saying a few words.
All right, Lieutenant. I will make this short because I know that you are all just as anxious to see this movie as I am. I wish that it were possible for me to meet all of you men personally. But since it isn't, I'll take this opportunity to say hello.
The War of Machines began with silence. In 1939, the world was filled with invisible voices, coded signals bouncing off clouds, naval traffic cutting through static, the whisper of Morse beneath a storm. Across Europe and beyond, the air itself became a battlefield, unseen, unmarked, but decisive. No one declared this front. No medals were issued for it. Yet, from Cornwall to Königsberg, Vladivostok to Virginia, engineers and listeners were building a new kind of weapon, stations that did not fire but heard, each nation built in secret. Britain called them Y stations. Germany called them Funkaufklärung, radio reconnaissance. The United States established monitoring posts. The Soviet Union, Osoby Otel, the special departments, raised intercept cabins near every active front. Each one an ear pressed against the static of war. Inside their wooden huts and concrete bunkers, the operators heard only fragments, meaningless dots and dashes, distorted voices, bursts of encrypted noise. Yet those fragments, assembled elsewhere, became truth. Sometimes entire fleets turned because of what one operator heard in the dark. When the guns finally fell silent, the listening did not. The transmitters changed, the frequencies shifted, but the habit of listening, of collecting, decoding, and never trusting silence, remained. The paradox is this: these stations were built to obey orders, to follow signal discipline, to hear only what command required. But in the end, they became something beyond control, self-sustaining systems of vigilance. They never stopped listening. Even peace could not turn them off. And so, the War of Machines continued, long after the soldiers had gone home. Years later, historians would point to a single truth. World War II could not have been fought without the flow of signals. By 1938, every major military power had grown dependent on radio for command, navigation, intelligence, logistics, propaganda. That dependence created a vulnerability and a need. Britain's Admiralty saw it first. German naval transmissions after the annexation of Austria hinted at the scale of coordination the Kriegsmarine had achieved. To counter it, the Admiralty and the newly formed Government Code and Cipher School ordered a massive expansion of listening capability. The embryonic Y service, born in World War I, was revived and industrialized. Within months, civilian post office engineers and amateur radio clubs were being quietly drafted into national service. By 1939, there were more than 200 British Y stations, from coastal huts in Cornwall to hilltop cabins in Scotland, each fitted with high-sensitivity receivers and direction-finding gear. Some were run by the Royal Navy, others by the Army or RAF. Many were manned by the Women's Royal Naval Service, WRNS, or civilian volunteers. Their job was simple: intercept, log and forward, nothing more. But simplicity belied the importance. Every intercepted message, even encrypted gibberish, had metadata: time, frequency, sender, call sign. Cross-referenced by Bletchley Park, this became the skeleton key of enemy communications. Across the Channel, Germany's Abwehr was doing the same. It built Funkpeilabteilungen, mobile direction-finding companies that tracked Allied agents' clandestine transmitters. In the Reich, vast arrays of intercept masts rose near Kiel, Hamburg, and Königsberg. Their enemy was silence itself. Any unregistered broadcast was presumed hostile. Creation invited decay. Each new transmitter built another vulnerability. When the Luftwaffe expanded its communications network in 1940, British Y stations immediately began recording its frequencies. When the British rolled out radar, German technicians captured its pulses and named it Freya. The act of communication itself became exposure. Far to the east, the Soviet Union faced an invisible crisis of its own. German forces were advancing. Traditional intelligence collapsed. The Red Army scrambled to improvise listening groups, small detachments of radio engineers trained to find enemy transmitters by bearing triangulation. They built crude direction-finding antennas from steel rods and captured cable. They moved nightly because once they began transmitting, the Germans could find them. In America, the need was industrialized from the start. The Navy's monitoring stations along the Atlantic coast began as neutral observers of global traffic. After Pearl Harbor, they became offensive collectors, triangulating Japanese fleet movements across the Pacific. What none of these nations foresaw was that by creating these webs of ears, they were also creating new dependencies. The armies would soon discover they could no longer fight or even move without their invisible informants. Information had become a weapon, and once created, it could not decay. By then, the decision was already made. I remember the hum first, low, constant, mechanical, the sound of electricity waiting to become language. They called us listeners, but what we were really doing was mapping an invisible world. Every hiss and spark on the line marked another human being somewhere, talking, pleading, commanding. We never heard the words, only the rhythm. Yet somehow, that was enough. Britain's vision was elegant in its simplicity. Thousands of civilian ears connected by a single analytical brain. Each Y station fed its logs to Bletchley Park, where cryptanalysts turned patterns into intelligence. The field and the mind were fused. The chain was fragile. Intercept, record, forward, decrypt. But it worked. In Germany, the vision mirrored it in reverse. They saw the ether as a front to be conquered. The Luftnachrichtenabteilung 350 coordinated the Reich's intercept network. Hundreds of Hochstellen, listening posts, sprouted across occupied Europe from France to the Baltic. Their engineers believed they could make the air itself a fortress, deny the enemy's signal, dominate his channels, jam his voice. The purpose was total control. The method, absolute vigilance. Soviet officers, watching their lines collapse in 1941, built their vision differently. They couldn't rely on centralized control, so they created mobile intelligence detachments, units that could move with the front, intercepting field radios directly. Their vision was survival, intercept or die blind. By 1943, these groups could identify the concentration of German armor simply by counting frequencies. In the Pacific, American engineers dreamt even bigger. They designed Pacific listening stations stretching from Pearl Harbor to Darwin to intercept Japanese command traffic. Their vision, to make the ocean transparent. Dual truths emerged. It was a war fought by unseen armies, and it was a faith sustained by noise. The officers envisioned machines of obedience, but the operators created networks of instinct. Each pulse on the wire was an act of faith that someone, somewhere, would make sense of it. Belief and electricity combined to form the first global web. It was built to obey. It became to know. Wood, copper, steel. The war needed huts more than monuments. At Scarborough, Wadlingtons, Beaumanoir and Cheadle, British crews worked day and night erecting the latticework of masts that would turn the air into a map. Each site used Adcock aerials, 4 vertical poles forming a square, feeding underground cables to a low concrete hut at its center. Inside, WRNS operators tuned national HRO and Marconi receivers. Valves glowed orange. Paper reels turned. Everything was redundant, every line duplicated. If one station fell, another would hear in its place. Each operator's logbook had to match time codes to the second. Synchronization was a form of faith. Across occupied Europe, German engineers built similar stations but in greater secrecy. They dug into sand dunes and forest clearings, camouflaged antenna farms, buried coaxial cable under moss, Telefunken sets, E52 Köln receivers, panoramic display oscillographs. Every new model came faster, more selective, more stable, more precise. Soviet units had to improvise. Their machines were often just captured German radios, repurposed to listen to German nets. In Leningrad, a single underground bunker contained dozens of these scavenged sets, powered by car batteries. When the electricity failed, they peddled generators to keep listening. And in the Pacific, Americans industrialized listening. At Bainbridge Island, Washington, the Navy built a concrete-walled operations building stuffed with racks of receivers. Similar posts sprang up in Oahu, Guam, and the Aleutians. The rhythm was the same everywhere: string wire, align bearings, log time, record frequency, transmit report. The machines became an organism: copper veins, glass organs, human nerves. Each station had its heartbeat, the mechanical tick of the key, the whisper of the pencil. Breakers popped, tubes burned, antennas iced over. Operators shivered in blackout. Still, they listened. The language of the machines was repetition: intercept, log, forward, intercept, log, forward. By 1942, the Allies alone were collecting tens of millions of words of enemy traffic every week. It was too much for any one human system to process. And so, they began to teach the machines to help. Early autologgers, relay sorters, frequency analyzers, mechanical thinking before computation. Staccato sentences mirrored their labor: mechanical, relentless, precise. A war fought by repetition and the hum of valves in the dark. No one expected it to survive the winter, yet it did. Now the stations are alive. Signals flash across the ether. Operators lean in. The air trembles with Morse. In Britain, WRNS operators at Beaumanoir intercept Luftwaffe ground traffic. Their pencils dance. They write everything, even gibberish. The messages are routed by motorcycle to Bletchley Park within the hour. The teleprinter lines click endlessly. Each line of code, a bullet unseen. In the North Atlantic, Y stations coordinate with naval direction-finding ships. A U-boat transmits for 30 seconds. Bearings are taken at Scarborough, Thurso, Gibraltar. Triangulation yields a fix within minutes. Destroyers converge. The U-boat captain never knows how he was found. In Germany, intercept officers listen to British bomber frequencies. They hear the static crack of an RAF squadron assembling over Norfolk. They plot bearing lines, feed them to flak command. Radar and radio intelligence merge. What begins as sound becomes defense, but silence can also deceive. In the winter of 1943, British Y stations suddenly lose all U-boat traffic. The Atlantic falls eerily quiet. Commanders panic. Are the Germans using new frequencies, or have they stopped transmitting? For days, operators search the bands. Then a faint burst. New call signs, shifted bands. The hunt resumes. On the Eastern Front, Soviet intercept units fight a different test. They monitor German command nets, detecting orders for retreats and counterattacks. When one key frequency goes dead, they know an entire division has been destroyed. Silence becomes signal. In the Pacific, the US Navy's Station Hypo listens for Japanese fleet codes. One day in May 1942, a message designates a target AF. The operators don't know what AF means, only that it matters. They trick the Japanese into confirming it refers to Midway Island. The rest is history. Everywhere the test is the same. Does the signal reach us, or does silence win? The machines do not rest. They hum through blackout, through bombardment, through exhaustion. The test never ends. Institutions live by procedure, and procedure was what turned scattered listening huts into the nerves of global war. In Britain, every intercepted message travelled through a chain now legendary. Y Station, Bow Manor Park, Bletchley Park, Whitehall. Each node obeyed the next, yet together they produced something no general could have imagined, a picture of war from pure signal. The institutional transformation was quiet. At first, Y stations were peripheral. By 1941, they had become indispensable. Every naval order, every Luftwaffe command was logged, decrypted, archived. The service was meant to listen. It ended up directing fleets. Ultra-intelligence, derived from Enigma decrypts, relied entirely on this raw harvest. Without Y station intercepts, there was no ultra, no forewarning of U-boat wolf packs, no knowledge of Rommel's supply shortages. Information moved faster than steel. In Germany, the institution mirrored it with grim efficiency. OKW/Chi, the High Command's Cipher Bureau, processed millions of lines of Allied traffic collected by Luftnachrichtenabteilung 350. They sought patterns in Allied radio silence, predicted bombing raids, even reconstructed British radar schedules. But their dual mandate was fatal: to listen and to hide. As Allied jamming grew, German networks folded under their own discipline. The Soviets ran on pragmatism rather than hierarchy. Field radio intelligence battalions reported directly to front headquarters. When German radio nets went silent, Soviet commanders knew an offensive was imminent. It was a crude system, but it worked. They called it radio feeling. In the United States, institution meant scale. By 1945, the Army Signal Security Agency and the Navy's OP-20G employed over 37,000 people. Messages crossed continents by teletype, punched cards, and airmail. The processing problem, too many signals to read, spawned early automation. Machines that sorted tapes by frequency were the direct ancestors of computers. Dual truths again. It was a system of obedience and a source of independent power. It was built to serve command, and it began to inform command. By 1944, no commander doubted the intercept networks. When they worked, they seemed divine. When they failed, entire campaigns fell blind. A single missed frequency could cost thousands of lives. Institutions that had once been listeners became authors of strategy. The voice of the machine was now the voice of the war itself. The silence that followed was louder than war. When the guns fell silent, the listeners kept their headphones on. The war had taught a terrible lesson. Information is never enough. One must own it. In April 1945, as Germany collapsed, Allied Command launched Operation TICOM, Target Intelligence Committee. Its mission was simple: capture every German signal intelligence officer, document, and device before the Soviets did. TICOM teams moved with lightning speed, seizing cipher machines, archives, and scientists. They interrogated men from OKW/Chi and Luftnachrichtenabteilung 350, absorbing their methods. The files were marked top secret, never to be released. The reports never said why. Soviet forces conducted their own mirror operation, capturing hundreds of German radio specialists and rebuilding stations in the east. Some of those experts would spend a decade designing listening posts for the KGB. The hidden consequence was not just knowledge transfer, it was institutional continuity. Britain's government code and cipher school became GCHQ. America's Signal Security Agency became the NSA. The Soviet Third Department evolved into the massive GRU and KGB signals directorates. The machines survived because they were useful. Wires were relayed, antennas retuned, frequencies shifted from enemy militaries to diplomatic channels. The enemy was new, the method the same. Memory and forgetting walk hand in hand. Many wartime operators were sworn to secrecy. Their families never knew what they did. When they died, their stories died too. Archives remained sealed for half a century. By the time the Cold War peaked, those wartime stations had become the nucleus of a planetary surveillance web. Chicksands, Menwith Hill, Fort Meade, Kuhnhausen. Old names, new missions. The war had taught nations to listen without cease. They forgot the reason why. The files were destroyed in 1946, but the machines remembered. Decades passed, and the buildings grew quiet, but not dead. At Hawklaw in Scotland, wind whistled through the empty antenna frames. Concrete bases mossed over. Children played where operators once sat in silence. Yet, beneath the earth, cables still ran to sealed rooms. GCHQ continued to use many wartime sites until the 1980s. Their Art Deco facades and radio bays hid microwave relays and satellite links. The war's architecture remained, only repurposed. Across the Atlantic, Fort Meade rose on the blueprints of wartime intercept centers. The NSA's first computer rooms occupied former Army signal buildings. Where once operators copied Morse, machines now read microwave telephony. In Germany, Western and Eastern services grew from the ashes of their predecessors. The Bundesnachrichtendienst, BND, built listening stations along the Iron Curtain. The Stasi constructed mirror sites across the border. Sometimes they even listened to each other. Soviet remnants spread from the Baltic to the Pacific. Concrete bunkers in Poland, giant antenna farms in Ukraine, abandoned radomes in Siberia, each a ghost of the first Y stations. Many remain visible today on satellite maps, frozen monuments to the age of listening. Visual motifs linger, a rusted mast against grey clouds, rows of vacant chair bolts, peeling paint where fingers once tapped Morse. The past has a colour, oxidized copper and paper yellow. By the 1990s, fibre optics had replaced radio, but the logic endured. Signals still crossed borders, machines still listened. Only the medium changed. What was born of necessity became habit. What was built for war became normality. We see the heritage in the parabolic fields of Menwith Hill, in the humming server rooms of Cheltenham, in the digital signals that replace Morse. The world remains wired for listening. We hear the echo still. The air is never truly silent. Even now, somewhere, a receiver listens to a signal no human has yet interpreted. The stations of World War II were the first nervous system of the modern world. They taught states that knowledge was not what one knew, but what one could overhear. From that lesson came the Cold War, and from the Cold War, the Information Age. The operators are gone. Their logs lie in archives. Their frequencies are silent. But the pattern they created, constant vigilance, instant relay, total record, became permanent. Obedience gave birth to chaos. The networks built to serve orders now generate their own. Algorithms replace officers. Data replaces dialogue. A machine built to listen has become a machine that decides. From the wooden huts of 1939 to the server vaults of 2025, the line is unbroken. Each upgrade merely amplified the original purpose. And the original purpose was to hear everything. Some say the era of radio is gone, that the ether is empty. But listen closely on a quiet night. You can still catch the ghosts of those stations. Carrier waves faintly echoing between continents, a memory in the spectrum. The machine built to obey had begun to think, and history would never forget it.